are. And
Press the button.
Yeah.
Hello.
Ah. Hi there.
Here we are again.
Back again.
Yeah, nice to see you, Maggie.
Ah, it's always lovely to see you, Ali. And it's the Magi and Ali Poetry Show.
Wow.
See, I got it right.
I got
this
the name
time.
right finally. I think that name might stick.
Yeah.
So this week we've had another week of sending poems back and forth to each other, not our own poems, again, other poets' work. And just, you know, we're always kind of like scanning the internet, trying to find poems that really set our hair on fire, really.
Yeah, or just connect with us in some emotional way. Sorry, that sounds like I'm saying women are over emotional. In the good way of being emotional. It's great when you read the poem and you don't even know what it is, but it's just connected.
Yeah.
But you haven't just been scouring the internet. You're going to scour bookshops as well.
I take photographs and I send them to Maggie. What do you think about this? And we're either delighted or we're outraged.
Yeah,
but
booksellers will be on watch for you coming in next time. They'll say it's her.
It's her again. But this week we found, well, it was a couple of weeks ago actually, we found this poem which we just both thought was so fabulous. We wanted to read it today and just talk about what we loved about it.
And we will put it underneath in the comments or on the bit about this programme on YouTube, where you can read the actual poem, because the poet has very kindly given us permission to talk about it and to reproduce it.
Yeah. So this is a poem by a Scottish poet called David Ross Linklater, and the poem is called Spark. I hate seagulls, but let me tell you this, when this one banked in the colossal shadow of the high-rise, it had all the slide guitar in the world behind it. A wonderful thing, the not-so-green grass and the long river sound, and even the old merciless sun let the air string a breeze through it. Lately, I am uneasy. Here I declare my love for everything, all because of the gull. The swine, the dirty, rotten bastard. I still hate them, but I'll give it to that one. It was fair what it did with the shadow, where the water had no mirror to catch it.
Thank you very much.
I mean, I thought I might cry reading it.
I was about to ask how you
just love this in every way. I mean, it's, you know, it's so simple on the page, but just even the opening line, I hate seagulls.
Yes, great. It actually took me in.
And then it kind of goes, but let me tell you this, you know, so you're like leaning in a bit more, aren't you? Because it's so conversational.
Absolutely.
And you want to know what he's going to tell you.
Yes.
And then it just goes on with that most exquisite line about, you know...
Oh, I forgot the same exquisite line. I wonder. That was...
Well, it had all the slide guitar in the world behind it.
Exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
The image of that gull coming in, coupled with that, you know...
But the sound is totally internal to him, the notion of the slide guitar.
Yeah, there's the sound of the slide guitar, but there's also just that, you know, the idea of the slide, sort of your fingers going down the fretboard as this seagull comes into land. Or it's
like it's got film music in it. It's very visual.
Yeah, it is.
That start to it.
Yeah.
Is so visual. I love poems where I can actually see them. I think that for me is very important. So you've got this gorgeous visual of a scene which shouldn't be beautiful.
That's right.
But there is a beauty.
It shouldn't really be beautiful.
And whenever he brings in the slide guitar, that was when I thought, I want to read to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. But even just that, when this one banked in the colossal shadow of the high-rise, I mean...
Yeah, it's lovely. I thought hearing you read it gave me yet more fresh insight into that line. Because it's
this colossal shadow. I mean, it's so... I just find it so original, yet so simple, yet, yeah, it's just, I mean, practically every line just screams to me from the page.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's a real city poem too.
Yeah,
it's about a seagull, which is very interesting, and he isn't scared to say, I hate seagulls. I think we've all felt that at times.
Yeah, and then he goes into the reason why he hates seagulls. Well, I mean, he may hate them for other reasons, but there's just that point in the poem where you realise that, when he says, here I declare my love for everything. I mean, that just sort of makes me want to cry.
Yeah, that's when the emotional punch comes in, though,
isn't it?
All
because of the gull.
Punch, and I shouldn't be, because it's an emotional connection where you, it's like he's human, as a human rather, is speaking to you as a human, and that again for me is poetry.
Yeah, I mean it's that line is everything. I mean, here I declare my love for everything, all because of the gull. And then he goes on, the swine, the dirty rotten bastard, because it's like that poet is perhaps would have preferred not to dip into this, huge emotional, memory or whatever it is that's bringing up for him, and so it's that.
I didn't get that right away, but that's my feeling. But because I said, I wonder that line there. But of course, that's what it is.
Yeah, he's furious because the gull has made him feel something that perhaps he didn't want to revisit. And then it goes on, I still hate them, but I'll give it to that one. It's fair what it did with the shadow. I mean, it's just so beautiful. Look, and then cry.
Yeah, I mean, that's the last stanza, which is just 5 lines, and the shadow is on a line its own, which is very powerful. Yeah. But the last line.
Yeah, where the water had no mirror to catch it.
Yeah. I mean, and you think that's just that in its entirety is what we like to call a poem.
This is a poem. Yeah. I mean, it was one. Yeah, it just both of us immediately liked. I mean, we sometimes might find poems where Maggie will like a thing about it, but I'm like, no, I don't like that thing about it, or vice versa. Yeah. But this, we both just loved it so much. So it's incredible. And also, if you go and look at David Linklater's website, he's got little snippets of him reading some of his other work, and he reads so beautifully.
Yeah, we'll put the link for that as well. He writes as David Ross Linklater.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because the stuff that's on his website, he has musicians.
Yeah, there's music accompaniment.
There's a music accompaniment. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, you should so much better. Leave it to me.
Yeah. But before we leave the poem, can I say, because we've so taken away with it, all the slide guitar in the world behind it. And that follows up with the next stanza. I mean, that has to be the last line of a stanza. I mean, you want to stop on that image, and that's what stanza breaks in free-form poetry. That's one of their major functions. And because you have to absorb it slightly, and then it goes on to a wonderful thing. But then he elaborates, the not-so-green grass and the long river sound, and even the old merciless sun. And it's that description, not so green grass and the long river sound, because I do believe from what he wrote about the poem that it is the River Clyde in the city. And just that not so green grass really spoke to me, because of course I'm seeing winter grass. It might have been summer because the sun was out, but you wouldn't know. But it just seemed very. It was like I could almost go and find the place on the where he wrote it, and the long river sound, and so what he's very, very strong on is using all the senses. Well, it doesn't have taste in here, but using his senses in unusual ways. So that we've got the slide guitar, we've got the long river sound, but it's also visual. So he's certainly using sight and sound and hearing in a way which is just totally natural. There's no sense of, I'd better, when we're teaching creative writing, we sometimes have to say to the class or the workshop, if they're beginners, to try to use all the senses. And here he just does it.
Just does it.
Totally
Just
natural.
does it. Probably completely unconsciously, of course. But you know, it's what you were saying before. That sounds like a wonderful thing, the not so green grass and the long river sound, and even the old merciless sun let the airstringer breeze through it. It is so beautiful. And yet, if you saw that scene,
yeah,
like, you know,
well,
sort of like a bit of sun but not too much, you know.
And of course it will be over in seconds. This morning.
Who manages to achieve
Yeah.
It's so great.
I think that even the old merciless sun, because I know when we spoke a few nights ago that we found that quite strange, but it's just on me. It's because of the slide guitar. It's like a line from that type of music, the old merciless sun.
I kind of feel like that line, and even the old merciless sun. There's just like this. There seems to be a lot of forgiveness in this poem in a way.
Yes.
And you know, he's even I don't even, you know, I'm not saying that there was some kind of message, but just as I think about the kindness or the forgiveness towards the old merciless sun, that's beautiful. Oh.
And now looking again, I'm now thinking this definitely is not a winter poem, which is originally I thought, of course it's a summer poem, but you know, this is what we've mentioned before, it doesn't matter if the reader has to, in a way, project some of their own life experience onto the poem. These two things are not separate.
Yeah, that's right.
And it really, it really is just very interesting the way one can get it slightly at the wrong angle, but it's still a fabulous poem.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And only David can tell us if it's
that's right.
what season this is.
Yeah.
But you've already mentioned the last stanza, haven't you?
Yeah.
So we will put this on so that you can read it yourselves, and thank David again for
thank you, David,
for allowing two women where he didn't really know what we were going to say.
No, I mean,
poets.
I did tell him I loved it. I couldn't know.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Right, Ali did the email.
So yeah, thank you, David. That was so just beautiful, amazing.
And especially as we've been reading through so many poems where they just didn't speak to us, they possibly speak to other people, but not to us. And to be fair though, to ourselves, quite a number of them are feeling, I mean, we're both free verse writers, but it's the quality as well. We find maybe people have just let them go too soon, they've maybe just not worked quite hard enough on them. And I'm sure I have poems out there in the wild like that too, but that's the whole learning process, and it's just great when you read something which leaves you feeling, well, that's one to go back to and go back to.
And I have gone back to that one many times.
And that's what,
Yeah, excellent.
Very good. So will we go on to a poem that we weren't so keen on?
Yeah.
I came to this one by a sort of strange route, because I was interested in I'm interested in the Irish Aisling poem, and Aisling is a girl's name now mostly. It's called spelled A-I-S-L-I-N-G, but pronounced Aisling, and it's mostly a girl's name, so people will have heard of that. But it means dream, and the and the style of poetry is a kind of where someone's in the real world, the poet is in the real world, and then they enter a kind of dream state where all sorts of weird and wonderful things happen, but they come back to the real world. They're very similar to some of the Scottish and border ballads, in fact, where you know, the Thomas the Rhymer and that type of thing. But anyway, this one is called Aisling, and it's by Paul Muldoon, and it was the one that kept coming up if I googled. It was kind of right up there first, and traditionally the form is only written by men, which was one of the reasons I was googling it, just out of curiosity. So, will I read this now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Aisling by Paul Muldoon. I was making my way home late one night this summer when I staggered into a snowdrift. Her eyes spoke of a slow year, her mouth a year of haws. Was she Aurora, or the goddess Flora, Artemidora, or Venus Bright, or Anorexia, who left a lemon stain on my flannel sheet? It's all much of a muchness. In Belfast's Royal Victoria Hospital, a kidney machine supports the latest hunger striker to have called off his fast, a saline drip into his bag of brine. A lick and a promise. Cuckoo spittle. I hand my sample to Dr. Maw. She gives me back a confident, all clear.
I don't know what it's, I don't understand.
Yeah, so it was impossible to get that emotional connection because it kept confusing. Now, to be fair to Paul Muldoon, this poem was written in 1983, so he's about 71 now. So he wrote it as a relatively young writer. So I think it's important that we remember that. And as I say, we've all got poems out there where someone could do this with. But it is kind of strange to come across a poem by someone with such a huge reputation, where both Ali and I just didn't quite feel it hung together even. It's like bits of a different poem. So we...
Yeah, I guess as we've said in the past, a poem, I don't need to understand the start, the middle and the end. It doesn't need to have a lovely tidy narrative clearly, but this one is just, I didn't even want to read it twice. I just disliked it. I think because I just felt I kept coming up against another line which I didn't really understand, and there didn't really seem to be much in the way of poetry within that for me.
Yeah. I think too, the first stanza, I thought, oh, right, I kind of understood the lines and understood that they were going into the Aisling idea of things not being in the real world quite the way they should be. So I was making my way home late one night this summer when I staggered into a snowdrift. And that obviously is quite strange, although as Ali pointed out, we wouldn't really be that surprised if that in Scotland.
Yeah, snow in summer, which is not.
Yeah, we don't get drifts, but we do get snow. Sometimes get snow.
Yeah.
But and then the next two lines are together. Her eyes spoke of a slow year, and I'm thinking, whose eyes? Because there's not been a woman mentioned. So I have no reference as to who. So you're trying to get. And of a slow year is SLOE, the berries, rather than, so her eyes spoke of a slow year, her mouth a year of haws, which are actually they are poetic lines, because the slow berry is very, very dark, and the haws are red. So
I don't know what a haw, what is that, from Hawthorne? Is that
what a haw is? Hawthorne berries, yeah.
Haw, I didn't know it was referred to as a haw. Okay.
Yeah, that's poets for you.
Oh, I know. Okay, yeah.
At least that's the way I'm reading the poem. Although it's not a word that would have come easily to me to say, but this next stanza, each of these names that are mentioned ending in A are obviously women's names, and Venus gets a mention, and they've got capital letters. So was she Aurora, or the goddess Flora? That was one I had a wee bit bother. No, I find that in a non-rhyming poem, that sudden, very, I think very obvious, right?
Yeah.
And then the next line, Artemidora, which I didn't know what it was anyway, or Venus Bright. But the next again line, or Anorexia with a capital A. It's bizarre. Who left a lemon stain on my flannel sheet. But if we just stay with the goddesses for a moment, Aurora, goddess of dawn. Flora, the goddess of flowers and nature. Artemidora, Did you think to look that one
No,
up?
I couldn't even
Yeah, you.
give it
I
that much.
looked up Artemidora, and she wasn't a goddess. She seems to have been, if I remember correctly, an Egyptian, ancient Egyptian princess or pharaoh's daughter, that type of thing. And I'm sure that's very few people would know that. So it's a quite esoteric reference. Or Venus Bright, well, I think we all know that one. But then to add on anorexia as a goddess, I find that. I just don't understand. I don't understand it, and there's no beauty to make me not care about understanding it. And it's anorexia who left the lemon stain on my flannel sheet. And the only sense I can make of that is that certainly in the 80s, when anorexia was much more, well, it's probably prevalent now, but certainly I knew people whose daughters had anorexia, and it was the first time it was really getting written about and spoken about. And and apparently one of the things some girls and young women would do would be to suck a piece of lemon to stave off their hunger. So I think that's, this was written in 83, I think that's the reference.
Right.
The next line, it's all much of a muchness, fine, it's all much of a confusion for me. But that next jump, do you want to say anything about
The
that?
next jump is just a jump. I mean, it doesn't seem to have any relevance. In Belfast Royal Victoria Hospital, a kidney machine supports the latest hunger striker to have called off his fast. A saline drip into his bag of brine. So it's, I mean, that obviously was happening around those times, we're aware of that, but it doesn't, I don't understand why.
Well, I mean, it's politically important, but it seems strange in an Ashling dream. And the first, it's a 5-line stanza, and the first 4 lines could easily be in a newspaper report. I mean, it's that kind of prose.
It becomes kind of,
there's no lift. And then it's the saline drip into his bag of brine, which is quite difficult to understand, but I think that's the dialysis, but I don't think that it's actually not saline. Oh, I had to look into all this. Feel for me. It's not a saline drip, and it's not essentially, I suppose you could push call it once it's been recircled through the kidneys, a bag of brine, but it's just strange. What is strange is not that Paul Muldoon or anyone else wrote this, because I think we all write things that don't hang together. It's not even strange that it got published at the time, because sometimes magazines will like a person's work and take something. But what is strange to me is that you Google Ashling, and this is essentially the top ones come up, and it's been studied, and God knows what people have said about it, but it's a poem that's not been allowed to disappear into the shadows of time, which might be useful. And the last stanza, 3 lines, a lick and a promise, cuckoo spittle, I hand my sample to Dr. Maw, she gives me back a confident all clear. I have no idea what it means, I have no idea how it links up with the rest of the poem. So instead of getting a conclusion, or even a conclusion that leaves me wondering in a way which can be very satisfying.
But you can just imagine people who are not that interested in poetry coming across that and reading it and being even less interested in poetry. And I think that's what we see that time and again.
And that's why we want to talk about this and bring it up. Every time a poem which seems to be a mystery, and which is very difficult even for 2 experienced readers, for them to understand where the poetry lies in it. If people aren't critical of it, then those people who are coming to poetry, very intelligent people often, and talented people, but people from every walk of life should be able to come to poetry and connect. It might not be their taste, but connect. And
Yeah,
I
but
think
not repel.
well, I think it's a disservice to us all when a poem. So this isn't a criticism of Muldoon. I think it's more a criticism of the poetry world, of academia, of those who keep this type of poem in the limelight when it shouldn't be. I'm sure Paul Muldoon has got many wonderful poems, and he has no control over it being on the internet and being on major poetry sites. He has no control in that. But because we're talking about it's the Magi Ali poetry show, we want to talk about.
We want to talk about the good and the bad, don't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, we have something else, but we could take a tiny break there.
Sure.
Yeah. And we shall be back in a
top up my
second.
coffee.
Yeah. To yes, it is. Honestly, it is coffee and tea. There is nothing in these drinks, much as Ali tried to make me. So with that, bye for a moment. We'll be the show.